Let's go to NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor. Former CIA officer and MSNBC national security and intel analyst Mark Polymeropoulos, and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Joel Rubin. Yamiche, this first call was set to begin at 10 a.m., so any minute. What kind of expectations does the White House have here?
Well, this is really a high-stakes call, and the expectations are very high, as President Trump said that nothing, quote, nothing can happen without him directly talking to the president of Russia. So that is now happening separately. He's going to then talk to the president of Ukraine and NATO leaders. So we know that European leaders have said that they're going to be pushing for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. But President Trump has also said he wants to end this war altogether, what he's calling a bloodbath. We've also just heard from the Vice President, J.D. Vance, earlier today in Rome. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I'd say we're more than open, then we're eventually just going to have to say, this is not our war. It's Joe Biden's war. It's Vladimir Putin's war. It's not our war. We're going to try to end it, but if we can't end it, we're eventually going to say, you know what, that was worth a try, but we're not doing it anymore.
Now, it's really interesting because the vice president is in some ways echoing what we've also heard from Secretary of State Marco Rubio and President Trump, essentially saying that the United States could walk away if things just don't look like they're progressing, if there's not enough enthusiasm to end this war. That being said, President Trump has said that he was going to end this war on day one. He since said that he was joking in some ways, but that he, in fact, is very much determined to end this war. But it is, I think, an open question. How long could negotiations go on without the White House just finally saying, you know what, we're going to walk away? That's a big question that is continuing to loom over all of this, Anna.
Joel, hours before this Trump and Putin phone call, Russia launched its biggest drone attack on Ukraine since the start of this war. Putin told state TV that Russia's going to win this war. What does that tell you about Putin's approach to these talks? Does he think he has leverage?
You know, Anna, it means that Putin thinks he's in the driver's seat. This is a weak policy. There's no demands on Vladimir Putin at all. In fact, right now, the Trump administration is not spending $3 billion that it was appropriated to provide in military aid to Ukraine. So what we're seeing is Vladimir Putin kind of leading this whole discussion. That's what's so strange about today's theatrics, which is it's almost as if Donald Trump is chasing Vladimir Putin, begging him to give him a bone, give him some kind of win, something to show that he is not being totally humiliated for claiming that he'd end this war on day one. But he hasn't, and it's an imbalanced policy. It needs to be rebalanced. The Congress is standing up, saying it will move on sanctions, and President Trump should move on those sanctions. He should have moved on them weeks ago, but certainly now, after these calls, I think he has no choice but to do so, because Vladimir Putin is not taking his arguments seriously.
But do you think, Mark, that more sanctions would make Vladimir Putin take Donald Trump more seriously?
Well, Anna, I wish that Trump would surely listen to the intelligence community. I'm sure there is many leadership profiles, there's many assessments that state that the only thing that Putin will listen to is pressure. Now, is pressure increased sanctions? I mean, you know, the package put together by Lindsey Graham is pretty robust. I also think that what should be on the table is increasing offensive military assistance to Ukraine. Of course, this is something that Trump doesn't seem to want to do. But, you know, basically the world sees this as the United States not being able to put pressure on Putin. I mean, Trump knows this. And so this really is crunch time. I think this phone call is going to set up probably a summit. But at some point, you know, President Trump either changes the narrative that he's not sided with Moscow, or he kind of goes along with this charade from the Russians. But, you know, Putin understands one thing, and that's pressure. The U.S. hasn't put that on him yet.
So, Yamiche, as Mark brings up, there's the question about whether there'll be this face-to-face meeting with President Putin and President Trump. And that's what we're hearing from the White House. This phone call is going to set this table for, right? Where do those efforts stand to actually get Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in the same room?
Well, that's a key question, because, again, it goes back to this idea that President Trump has continued to say he has a friendly relationship with President Putin, that he feels like he can do this deal and get this done. That being said, getting them in a room is complicated. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio talked about that over the weekend. Take a listen.
We don't want to be involved in this process of just endless talks. There has to be some progress, some movement forward. Ultimately, one of the things that could help break this logjam, perhaps the only thing that can, is a direct conversation between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. The mechanics of setting that kind of meeting up would require a little bit of work, so I can't say that's being planned as we speak in terms of picking a site and a date. But the president wants to do it. He wants to do it as soon as feasible.
Now, here are two things that are really important. The first is that there was supposed to be this delegation meeting, this summit in Turkey, and President Putin had suggested it. President Zelensky of Ukraine showed up, and then President Putin said, actually, I'm not going. And then the two delegations were literally in separate cities, miles and miles apart, one in Istanbul, one in Ankara. Eventually, they ended up getting together. The other thing is that the president has said that he wants to meet with President Putin at some point, but we just don't know if the logistics are going to be there, though he has gotten more critical of President Putin, which is, I think, a really interesting space to watch. We know we saw that disastrous meeting in the Oval Office with the president of Ukraine. So what it actually looks like and how combustible a meeting could be is also a big question here, Anna.
Joel, what are your thoughts on getting Trump and Putin in the same room? How would you be advising the president to handle that scenario? What red flags or red lines would you be concerned about?
Well, you know, and I think that's Donald Trump's goal all along. He wants to reset American relations with Russia. He wants to ally with Vladimir Putin. This war with Ukraine is an irritant. It's a sort of a stumbling block to getting that alliance going. And quite frankly, I don't know why we would bet on a dying horse. Look, we just had elections in Romania yesterday where the population voted for a centrist candidate, not the Kremlin candidate. The European Union is now getting closer to Britain after Brexit. Democratic allies of the United States do not want to be allied with Vladimir Putin. So doing a phone call and then a meeting with Vladimir Putin for not stopping this war really does signify that Donald Trump doesn't want the war as the primary concern. What he wants is the U.S. allied with Russia, and that should concern all of us.
Although about a month ago, Mark, we saw Trump actually change his tune on Putin, posting famously, Vladimir, stop. That was after Russian strikes on Kyiv, and Putin was, you know, obviously ignoring this as far as what we've seen since then. Do you think he respects President Trump?
No, I think Putin thinks President Trump is a very easy mark. I mean, you know, one of the interesting things is that, you know, we see some difference in rhetoric. You know, the U.S. has been a bit more critical, whether it's a Trump Truth Social post or comments by Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance. They've been a little bit more critical of Putin, but that has not translated into action. And I think at this point, that is what we need to see if there's going to be any kind of change in U.S. policy. You know, the European allies of Ukraine are watching this incredibly closely. And you know, my recommendations to my European friends in governments there is to certainly plan for the notion that the U.S. is going to walk away. Because even if, for example, Trump does something that we see as somewhat tougher on Russia, you know, everything is so dysfunctional, he can change his mind 3, 4, 5 days later. And I think Joel and Yamiche have said it perfectly, that ultimately Trump wants better trade relations with Russia. He wants rapprochement with Putin. That is his ultimate goal. So if you're in Zelensky, if you're Zelensky in Ukraine, if you're the European partners, you have to plan almost for a day after where the U.S. does depart the scene.
Yeah, on that, Joel, we heard the vice president essentially say there could come a day where the U.S. just pulls out of this altogether. What's the risk if that happens?
Yeah, you know, those are not empty words. When the vice president of the United States says that, that has real meaning and impact. And to do that, for the United States to walk away from a democratic ally that is on the receiving end of an assault, an invasion by an autocratic regime, should send shivers up the spine of all of our allies around the world, Taiwan included, who's looking at China. Of course, our European allies now, they're unifying, trying to find ways to backfill support to Ukraine in the case of the United States pulling out. This is a major shift in ideas, ideology, and national security strategy for the United States. You know, I believe that we still have deep commitments here in the country towards our democratic allies nationally and in the Congress. But the president and his team, they don't seem to view that as the primary commitment for our foreign policy. And I think that's what you hear when J.D. Vance says we can walk away.
Yamiche Alcindor, Mark Polymeropoulos, and Joel Rubin, thank you all so much.